welcome to another conversation session here at the ABLE Annual Meeting 2021. I'm excited to introduce to you Spiros Simotas from the University of Virginia, who is going to lead a conversation today on Attention and Reflection Tracker, a supplementary tool for ePortfolios. Over to you, Spiros.
Okay, thank you, Christina. Thank you all for being here today. Let me just share my screen first. Okay, can you all see this browser window over here?
Yes, I can see it, Spiros.
Okay, that's great. So as you can see, before I jump into the project, the art project, as you can see here, my partner, Yitna Ferdiuek, couldn't make it today because he had a scheduling conflict. So I don't really have a partner for conversation, and I hope that you will be, talkative during our session, because I have a small conversation, and then, it's questions, answers, like a brainstorming, like an open-ended conversation. So this art project, Attention and Reflection Tracker, is a quirky project. So I hope that it will, that it will be provocative enough so you can have a lot of questions and a lot of curiosity about it. Recently, we have created a website. It's still under development, but you can visit this address over here. Actually, I can just open it really quick. So this is our website. And you can go, you can navigate and learn more about the project, and we will keep adding more materials as we go. Sorry, I see that there is, okay, so somebody, Christina posted the link in the chat too. All right, so I'm gonna go back to, so I don't have a slide presentation. I prefer to do something like a document or like a web page instead of a presentation. So this is what it will look like. So yeah, before I start, our Attention and Reflection Tracker kind of echoes, as you can imagine, those of you who are familiar with what we call now the ePortfolio mantra: collect, reflect, present. So it echoes that second part of the mantra, the reflection part. Collecting materials and presenting materials is relatively easy. But the reflection part, I think, is the most challenging one. And this is where the Attention and Reflection Tracker comes in to actually make this process create some sort of habit of reflecting, and we will see how. So the origin of the story is personal analytics. Personal analytics, at least for the last 10 years, have been known as quantified self. And personal analytics is basically the data that one collects about themselves. For example, if you have a Fitbit, it collects a certain amount of data about your exercise routines, your steps, calories, etc. And Stephen Wolfram, who, at least to my knowledge, is kind of coined that term, personal analytics, said in a blog post in 2012 that one day everyone will routinely collect all sorts of data about themselves. And that led, of course, to the quantified self movement, which was facilitated by the number of miniature sensors contained in our devices today. And it made the process of collecting data very easy. The difference, though, is that art and quantified self, they don't really match. They are on a different side of a spectrum, where quantified self is data collection about improving oneself, making for self-optimization, as the founders of the movement like to say. So to become healthier, you have to do more steps, you have to consume less calories. To become stronger, you have to exercise more. To become more productive, you have to, let's say for our milieu, you have to write more, you have to publish more, etc., etc. Well, on the other side of the spectrum is art. You can, and this is my hypothesis, that you can collect data not for the sake of self-improvement, but for the sake of self-discovery and for giving shape to a certain extent to your life experience, and in this particular case, to your learning experience, the learning process. And I have here two pictures. Here, for example, is a picture from artist Richard Long, a line made by walking, created in 1967. Richard Long was a part of an artistic movement called land artists. So they made art not in galleries, not paintings, not sculptures. They made art with other means. And here you see, for example, that it's a sort of a shape of some sort of experience, right? So you walk going from one place to another, and usually you don't notice your steps, you know, or the traces that you left behind. But what happens if you start doing those? When you start paying close attention to these traces, they become some sort of inscription. And how does that inscription then shapes that experience? So this is Richard Long's take on that sort of idea. And then more recently, we have Jeremy Wood, who tracks all his walking or journeys or trips around London, where he lives, with a GPS. So here we have what I said earlier. So he had a device very easily accessible today. He walks around with this device, and the data that he collects with his device, he presents them then as an overlaid map. So over time, this map becomes more and more complicated because he keeps updating it over time. So here you see, for example, the map from 2000 and 2016. So the idea behind the art project is what's the shape of one's learning, right? And here I present an excerpt from a recent book from artist Camila Janan Rashid called No New Theories. And here somehow you can see her own kind of layering of a process that for her at least, and for her artwork, is never ending. this idea of completion doesn't exist in her own work. And this is what she tries to call attention to, that completion is kind of an elusive idea. So with art, students can collect can generate data about their learning process, and we'll see how they do that later on with this demonstration. They can turn this data into a compelling visualization, this idea of giving shape to something that I was trying to explain earlier. And as they go, in every step of the way, they do micro reflections. So each data point, let's say, is accompanied with a micro reflection. And at the end, they also reflect on their overall visualization of the project. So I've started this project in 2019 in the spring semester. I started collecting data from my students, not collecting, I started to invite my students to do that project in my classes. And the questions that I used are in this demonstration here. So I asked them to use this form to self-assess their progress in this course and to record their micro-reflection and other observations that they may have. So at the end of the semester, their personal data would become a compelling visualization showing their learning journey. So here are the questions. And so I asked them about attendance, were you absent or present in the course? And if you were absent, why you were absent? Then I asked them about preparation. So in a scale from 1 to 10, how prepared were you for that class session today? And I have to mention here, these are self-assessment questions, and I don't, these do not affect their grade. So if they say 1 or 2 or 3, their grade will not be affected. That numerical value will just create a coordinate for the line to go through. So it's just a checkpoint, nothing else. It doesn't affect their grade. So that's why I asked them to be honest, basically, with themselves. So the next question is about attention. And I understand that this can be formulated in so many ways. This is just, an entry-level way that I have formulated it. Again, from a scale 1 to 10, how attentive, how focused you were in this session today. Then the next question is about contribution. So participation in class, I teach French language and culture. So I'm interested in the usage of French language in the classroom, but also there is a question here, or there should be, about helping others during session, especially during the group activities. And at the end, okay, the 2-minute meditation. So I should have said earlier in the beginning that before we start our sessions, we do a very short 2-minute meditation. Basically, we just sit in silence with our back straight, with our eyes closed, if we are able, and we're trying, to kind of let everything else outside of the room and kind of connect with that little community that we form for that particular time in that particular space. And I asked them at the end how helpful was the meditation session that particular day. A fun fact, if you want, is that students in the beginning of the semester, some students have their own meditation practices and they're familiar with that. But other students, the students who are reluctant to that little 2-minute meditation practice, by the end of the semester, if I skip a meditation, they ask for it. So it's kind of it's a funny, like little thing to see the transformation there, how it happens. So this is the art form, the art questionnaire, the self-assessment questionnaire that I have used so far. But I understand that this can be different for different educators, for different teachers, for different classes. And that's another thing that art is capable of. It's very highly customizable. Basically, you can create your own form. So at the end of the semester,
Spiros,
yes,
we have a couple of questions for the questionnaire in the chat if you'd like to take a look, please. Okay. One is from Ryan, who says, very interesting work, Professor Simotas. Can you see the students' responses to the self-assessment? And are these self-assessments anonymous?
Well, yes, I can see them. They are not anonymous because they ask them to enter their email in the beginning. And because otherwise I will have no, if they're completely anonymous, I can't gather specific data for each student. So to create this presentation, I have to gather from the spreadsheet the data that Sophia entered, for example, in order to come up with this visualization.
Right. Then that leads nicely into the second question, that one from Mindy. How often do you give this questionnaire?
Ideally, the more checkpoints you have, the better. In all sort of like creative or learning processes, it's nice, and this actually comes from all the people who do this type of personal analytics. They realize that the more checkpoints you have, the better. In order to have a more precise shape, right? We understand, all of us understand that data generation or data collection is by default incomplete. We cannot have all the data possible, but as much as possible would be better. And I'll show you why. So this student, for example, Sophia, how often? Okay, so I'm sorry, I didn't respond precisely to that question. I give it to them in the beginning of the semester, and I ask them to complete it after every class session. But not all of them do. And if I don't remind them, they might forget about it. So it is somehow of a personal engagement thing too, as some kind of curiosity. That's why I want it to be a self-discovery thing. And I cannot force my students to do a self-discovery journey if they don't want to. Okay, so here, at the end of the semester, this student, Sophia, had answered many times this questionnaire. And from her personal data, this visualization was created. You can see, for example, each line corresponds to one of the the thematic questions, for example, attendance, preparation, contribution, speaking in French, and the dotted line in the middle is the meditation practice, right? And here is a part of Sophia's end of the semester reflection at her e-portfolio, looking at her own visualization. So she says that my visual reflection serves as a great metaphor for how this class went for me. My personal rating of academic performance fluctuated greatly. And that was the case, actually, because if you see other students' visualization from Nansei class, the lines were much smoother. So she saw and she felt that, you know, that there was some kind of fluctuation there. There were many days where I became greatly frustrated with my lack of confidence in my French speaking, but I was ultimately left with an image that I find to be very beautiful and floral. And here at UVA, we have this idea from the Contemplative Sciences Center, the Student Flourishing Initiative. So that's why I chose, for example, the chart, which is called the radar chart, to present the students' visualizations, because it's elusive to that idea of a floral, you know, like a flower blooming, a flower growing, or you can see it as the growth of the tree rings. So I said in the beginning that so art is some kind of a it echoes the second part of the e-portfolio mantra: collect, reflect, present. But it does so in the micro level, because at the end of each completion of the questionnaire, students are invited to add a micro reflection, an observation, something that they would like to, something that they noticed that day, that they observed about themselves or about their learning, and that they would like to keep. And as I said before, the more of those little micro reflections you have, the more precise you are, the more precise your overall reflection about the semester would be, because you have a multiple checkpoints. You can give a better shape to that reflection about how the semester was for you. And this is basically our main argument with Yitna. We think that by using art, students take the habit to reflect on a micro level that then will facilitate the macro level reflection demanding or asked in their e-portfolio completion. So we didn't stay there. We could have stayed here with a, you know, like a JPEG or a digital, you know, digital file, an image that is a digital file. But we didn't stay there. We I wanted my students to leave that semester, leave my class with something material, something that they could wear, for example, something that they could take with them. And for that reason, we took the same data, the same visualization, basically, and we turned it into, here is one of my students, Andrew, who helped me a lot. We are in the makerspace at the Fab Lab at the architecture school here at the University of Virginia. And he is he's working with the Bernina sewing machine. And here's the Bernina sewing machine doing her work. Oh, by the way, you see the difference between these two shapes? Okay, this is Andrew's visualization. He only completed the form 3 times. So you see the shape is completely different than this shape. And this student completed it only once. And here are all the badges that we created that semester for my whole class. I was lucky to have a small class because this took a lot of time to figure out. So you see, like, each visualization, each shape is different. Every student learns and flourishes in their own way. Okay, the second time that I had my students fill out the art form, the art questionnaire, at the end of the semester, we did a different project. We teamed up with the Rare Book School, which is another resource that we have here at the University of Virginia. And as you can see, we created a poster, and we printed that poster in a letterpress printing of the 18th century. And here is one of my students holding one of the posters that we printed that day. And as you can see, they are small here, but these are the shapes, you know, like for that particular class, I didn't give them an individual badge or an individual little thing, but we had the whole class, the images of the whole class in one limited edition poster. So you see all the different shapes here. For the fall semester, I would like to have students do 2 things. One kind of entry-level making activity that could be done very easily, which is buttons. You know, you have a button press, and you can take your visualization and you can create buttons that you can then wear on a jacket or something, or your backpack. And then we have asked for a silk screening kit. So students who want to do something like a more involved making, who are more into arts and crafts, they can silk screen their t-shirts or tote bags or any other material that they would like.
Spirits, David is asking, have the students stacked their individual reflections over time? It would be interesting to see them evolve over time as a movie, as another sort of visualization.
Oh, I think that this is what you mean. This is what you mean, like create something like that. So this is a little gift that I created myself for my students of the first class, where I did this experiment with. Yeah, and you see, again, this what I wanted to say with this visualization is that every student grows and every student flourishes in their own particular way. That's why this idea of giving shape to your learning experience was important to me, and being honest with your own data, because you're not graded. So here is where I would love you to come in, and I will give you a few minutes to fill out this form, which is very easy. So I presume that you come from different disciplines, you teach classes with different needs. So what would you love if you use that attention and reflection tracker, if you use that little thing, that self-assessment tool? What would you like to ask your students? So I'm going to give you the link. I'm going to put it in the chat. And I will, how much? Yeah, we have a lot of time. Maybe 5 or 7 minutes. Take a few minutes to fill out this form, and we can get back together and start discussing. Maybe you have other more questions about what I've said already, or maybe questions will just emerge by your participation in the form. Okay, so thank you all for writing your thoughts and your questions. I see a lot of different ways that you could use this project in all sorts of different directions. I would like to answer first Nixon's question about, so he has a question about what inspired students to get involved in the art project, in a project as such, okay? And then he also has a comment, how does art questionnaire relate to the ePortfolio experience? And I've tried to kind of, connect the two. Maybe it was not so clear, so I'm gonna give it another try. So the ePortfolio mantra, at least the way we use it here at UVA, is collect, reflect, and present. So since ePortfolio is an evidence-based learning, students collect learning materials. They reflect on those materials and on their learning experience. And at the end of the semester, they make a selection and they present what we call like a more professional, let's say, a more polished ePortfolio. So some of the materials that they have collected in the beginning will disappear for some sort of a more polished version. But to me, this is where I see a disconnect with the learning experience. And that's why I brought up Camila Janan Rashid, contemporary artist. I brought up her spread from the spread from her book, where you can see all the layers that went into let's say getting something done or completing something or writing something. I wish ePortfolios looked more like Camila's Janan Rashid spread than a more polished, professional, let's say, looking ePortfolios, smiling faces, here are my achievements, my accomplishments, my degrees, hire me. I think that the process kind of disappears with all its pleasures and the pains that are. So that's why, for me, the inspiration comes from artists, and artists who give a lot of, pay close attention to their own process, not the complete object that they will produce. The process is the product sometimes. And this is what I'm kind of, I'm kind of sensible to the process of things, and not the completion. The completion, you can go back many times, even with something that is completed. Actually, Camila's Janan Rashid book was completed without that spread and the many pages that follow that spread. But she found a typo or an error that she had made in the first run of the book. And she panicked. She took it off the shelves and she republished it. But while she was doing that process, she realized, no, I don't want to give a polished version of an object, making all that correction process disappear. I want to make that visible. And and she had that breakthrough, and she made that video. So I would love e-portfolios to be more like, like a working desk, if you want, a messy working desk with a lot of things going on, instead of a polished version of a completed, let's say, product. Both have their fans, I guess. So I hope, Nixon, I answered your question. Okay. And I saw, how much time do we have left? We have about 5 minutes. Instead of me talking, would you like to just unmute yourself? And if you have posted a question, what question did you post?
I'm Margot, and I'm actually a career counselor and educator. So I come from that career sort of background. So a little bit more of the showcase portfolio perspective. But I love the idea of this and using it in a career space where students are doing internships or other things besides classes. And the concept, like Mindy was saying, of the reflecting along the way is so important. Whatever they do with it in the end is maybe a different thing too. But could there be a form that they fill out weekly during their internship, or daily even, or something and then they could see at the end what they learned or how often they interacted with their supervisor or whatever the questions were. It would be fascinating, though, to see if there was a way they could put that in their learning through an internship in their portfolio as a visual that another employer or somebody, a grad school admissions officer or something, could see and take in also. Like the lines could be colored, like this line is for me, meeting with my supervisor regularly and how much I got out of it or something. Could be fascinating too. So it could be an attractive visual along with the words like your student Sophia wrote. That could be really powerful.
Mm-hmm. And all these actually, when you create the visualization when you have a spreadsheet with data and you go to tweak the visualization, you can have the numbers, you can have some sort of explanation about what you're seeing. But I wanted to strip down all these elements and keep the object as an evocative object of something. You don't know what you're looking at. So what does that say? So I wanted to be more artistic than more like a statistic model, that you can follow to be successful, the neoliberal kind of approach. Andy?
Yeah, well, so this is a funny comment coming on the heels of that. I really like the idea of the evocative object. I think that's fascinating, and it really helps them to I assume helps students to reframe their experience in a unique way. Another thing I was thinking about while I was sort of thinking through these questions is if you pulled it into, because this is just data that you're plotting, if you pulled it into sort of a more traditional line graph, you might plot the 5 categories, but then also plot, my first thought was you could do like, well, here are your 4 exam scores, right? And here, what was going on when you scored this way or that way. Or to be a little less, I don't know, heavy-handed, it could be here are your lines over time. And then here are like sort of big events that happened, like maybe spring break happened, or we went on lockdown, or, to sort of see those moments, I think would be really interesting for students at the end of the semester to say, here's how I felt in that moment. In the micro, here's how I saw it. But when I look at it, the whole thing in a macro, you can layer onto it different other data points that, I don't know, they may lead to sort of connections that they might not have made otherwise. So I think this is such an interesting project.
Yeah, and this is another way to visualize actually that learning experience, as you said, mapping onto it the great events, let's say, of the world, pandemic, lockdown, et cetera, spring break, or the more local events like the spring break, a football match, or personal events, as you said, like, oh, I was sick that day, I was something, a family emergency, whatever, yeah, that would be very interesting to like take a different, or maybe even have both. Maybe even have both visualization, because it's easy to, it doesn't require a lot of technical, let's say, competence to get to those graphs these days.
Which leads
sorry, go ahead.
Sorry,
Christina,
Spiros. Which leads nicely into a question that Mindy had earlier. What is the step from the questionnaire data points to the visual product? Is that process manually charted or produced by a platform?
Both. So you have to manually go, and I didn't want to go into the weeds, like showing a demo of how to do that, starting with a spreadsheet, selecting your data, and then choosing the visualization that the chart, let's say, from a big array of options that Google gives you, Microsoft Excel gives you. And then from there, you can, manually, you can tweak the lines, the thickness of the lines, the color of the lines. Because we made physical objects out of the visualizations, for me, it was important to keep the lines in one color. But you can choose, for example, to make your meditation line blue, your preparation line red, your contribution line green, et cetera, so you can have a better, like understanding of what's going on. Yes, so the platform offers the tools. You have to manually tweak them to get to the result that you want. And that's another, let's say, making experience for the students, because you can let them free. If there's no physical object materialization of the thing involved, you can let them free to tweak and play around with their visualization and come out like, I don't know if you saw this visualization that Yitna posted. I'm gonna just put this link in the chat so you can see. So you can find all that info in our website. And if you scroll down the page that I just sent you in the chat, you will see the visualization of a student in Yitna's class, colorful lines, it kind of looks like a stylized Jackson Pollock kind of. So abstract art again.
So Spiros, you are here correctly then that you also make that data available to each individual student, their own set of data, so that they can tweak it themselves and play with it. Great.
And that's another question that we can discuss maybe next year, because now the time is running out. Do we give as teachers to students that, like, how much control do we want to have as teachers over this project? Do we set up the questionnaire for them, or we can let them free to create their own questionnaire? Pick from a pool of questions, or even create their own questions and start tracking their learning progress like that with their own set of questions. For example, if you know that personally you are distracted easily, maybe you want to kind of notice where these distractions are coming from and when. So you can leave also a lot of personal. You can open it up to the students to create their own questionnaire and start collecting their own data. And then at this point, you're not involved in who has them and whether you have to give them back their data per student.
Yes, I think that's what I thought first, that it would definitely be more work because you'd have to set up a questionnaire per student. But if each student had a questionnaire, then you could share that directly with them without needing to worry of kind of stripping out other students' data, and they could play immediately with those visualizations and look at their progress over time.
Yes, goal setting, exactly. Yes, goal setting. But again, you know, like when we go toward the skill set, the competencies, the professionalization and all that stuff, and tracking, it can become very easily, you know, control, surveillance, you know, like the neoliberal nightmare. So that's why personally, I want to go to the other side of the spectrum, to be more artistic. Let's create something, what our experience look like. Let's give it a shape without, you know, like kind of, you know, attributing value to those lines.
I think it's a fantastic abbreviation for that you do have art in there, yet
exactly.
Also it means attention and reflection tracker, so that you marry both together.
Yeah, so for us, to a certain extent, the acronym is more important than the individual words, because we kind of want to claim that artistic territory, personal expression, and making. And all the micro decisions and micro reflections that go into, you know, whatever projects you're working on. I hope that I answered your questions, that I didn't leave anything, because I have one screen here, I have another screen here. I hope that I didn't leave anybody, you know, any question unanswered.
No, I think we have all of them.
We can keep the conversation going. I sent you our website. You have the link to the questionnaire. I can also post my email here. We recently published our website, so it will keep growing as more, you know, people are interested in using it, and as we ourselves, you know, use it more. And we will want at some point to have it integrated with like an add-in or a plug-in with a platform or a browser. So you won't need to hack Google Forms or any other forms, you know, to get there.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry, go ahead. Oh, just one final thought. While you were talking just now, it made me think about, so a thing that I'll have students do is to track their time spent writing, right? And the reason we do that is to sort of bring attention to the fact that to produce something, it actually does take time, right? Like the labor of writing is invisible. This makes it visible. I really like this idea, then making it also art. So here's a drawing of what it was like to write that article, right? This representation, this sort of blooming. I think this is a beautiful idea. Thank you so much for sharing it.
If you want to use it, you have access to the demo, right? And you can create a questionnaire easily. I assume that you have the, you know, like you're tech savvy enough to, you know, to do something like that. Yeah, and I would be interesting, you know, to if you choose to do it this fall semester, I would be very interested to see what your class, you know, the results of your art project with your class.
I've got your email. I'll keep in touch.
Thank you so much.
Very interesting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Spiros, for this wonderful demonstration of marrying reflection and art, and also giving us all ideas of how we can have different visualizations that are more artful, but also meaningful, and also meaningful in a portfolio, in a reflective way in the portfolio. and therefore see the progress over time, which of course for the learning portfolio is a major aspect. And so I very much look forward to seeing more of that work, and also see what everybody here in the session and those watching the recording later on will make out of that. And maybe we have started a new trend of having more data visualization in there that also looks very artful. So thank you very much. And
thank you all for coming.